Welcome. We are not here today to talk about the sequence of events or, the narrative arc of a movie, though it is one that is burrowed deep into the collective subconscious. We are here to talk about a cultural phenomenon, a film that absolutely redefined an entire genre, changed multiple careers, and remains a powerful, often controversial touchstone in cinematic history.
Right.
Today, we are opening the file on Jonathan Demme's 1991 psychological horror thriller, The Silence of the Lambs.
And it's fundamentally important for you to understand right from the start that this film is a genuine historical anomaly in Hollywood.
A total anomaly.
We throw around the word classic a lot, but The Silence of the Lambs achieved things that literally no other film of its type has before or since.
And that unprecedented achievement is what we're focusing on first. I mean, it's not just a successful film, it's a statistical outlier in terms of prestige and recognition.
Exactly. Let's start with the Academy Awards. First and foremost, it remains the only psychological horror film. And many people consider it the only horror film, period, ever to have won the Academy Award for Best Picture.
Just that fact alone separates it from
virtually every other genre be produced in the modern era.
But the achievements didn't stop there.
They truly didn't. It is the most recent film and only the third in the entire history of the Academy Awards to secure what is universally known as the Big Five sweep.
And that Big Five victory, it means total consensus across the most critical elements of filmmaking.
You're talking Best Picture?
Best Picture, Best Director for Jonathan Demme, Best Actor for Anthony Hopkins, Best Actress for Jodie Foster, and Best Adapted Screenplay for Ted Tally.
When a film manages to win all five of those, it isn't just luck.
No, it speaks to a shared industry belief that the material, the execution, and the performances were all operating at a perfect elite level. And what's remarkable is that it achieved this level of prestige without being a pre-sold, established blockbuster. It was a sleeper hit that defied expectation.
It absolutely was. It was produced on a relatively modest budget for a mainstream Hollywood thriller, just $19 million.
Which is nothing, even then.
Right. Yet its quality, its intensity, and the word-of-mouth success drove it to gross and astonishing $272.7 million worldwide.
Wow.
This achievement fundamentally altered how studios viewed dark material. It proved that a genuinely smart, intense thriller dealing with the most horrific psychological themes could achieve mainstream critical and commercial dominance simultaneously.
That commercial success makes the backstory even more compelling because that road to production was just full of creative near misses and financial luck that almost derailed the project entirely.
Oh, absolutely. The foundation, of course, is the source material. It's an adaptation of Thomas Harris's 1988 novel. But we have to place it in context. The general public was sort of familiar with the Hannibal Lecter character already, just under a different name.
You're referring to the fact that The Silence of the Lambs was the second film to feature Lecter on screen.
Correct. Michael Mann's 1986 film Manhunter was the first adaptation of Harris's work, based on the novel Red Dragon.
A great film in its own right, but
while the film is now considered a classic, in 1986 it failed to connect with audiences and was a financial disappointment. And that failure, ironically, is what made The Silence of the Lambs possible.
And that's where the early development and the rights acquisition become a story of spectacular good fortune for Orion Pictures.
It really is an astounding moment of bad business for one party and just pure luck for the other. The initial push for The Silence of the Lambs was driven by Orion Pictures, partnering with the heavyweight actor Gene Hackman.
Oh, I'd forgot about that.
Yeah, Hackman intended not only to direct the film, but potentially star in it, possibly playing either Jack Crawford or even Hannibal Lecter himself. Hackman and Orion split the $500,000 cost for the rights to the novel.
But the rights to the character of Hannibal Lecter were a separate issue, and they were held by someone who had been burned by that initial cinematic attempt.
Precisely. Those character rights belonged to Dino De Laurentiis, who had produced the failed Manhunter.
So he was probably not eager to get back into the Lecter business.
Exactly. Because De Laurentiis had taken a financial bath on Manhunter and essentially written off the Lecter character as non-viable IP, he made an incredible decision.
What was that?
He lent the rights to the Hannibal Lecter character to Orion Pictures for absolutely free.
No way.
That character, which went on to anchor a $500 million franchise and an Academy Award-winning film, was acquired for $0.
That decision must haunt De Laurentiis. But even with the rights secured, the project hit a major early roadblock involving Hackman.
It was a shocking moment for the production team. Screenwriter Ted Talley was only halfway through the first draft of the adaptation when Gene Hackman suddenly withdrew from the project.
Why?
The reasoning was deeply personal and surprisingly relatable. His children requested that he stop taking on violent film roles. When he left, not only did the project lose its director and potential star, but the initial financing it fell apart.
So that is the moment where the film should have died. A half-finished script for a very dark novel, no director, and no money.
It was critically vulnerable, but Orion co-founder Mike Medavoy showed immense faith. He encouraged Talley to continue writing, guaranteeing that the studio would find the financing and a replacement director.
Wow.
And that faith paid off when Jonathan Demme signed on to direct. Demme read the Thomas Harris novel, loved it, and immediately committed.
The momentum must have been incredible once Demme was attached.
It was. Talley recalled being absolutely startled by the speed of things. They met in May of 1989 and were actively shooting the film by that November.
That's a fast turnaround.
It suggests that Talley's script was incredibly strong, and Demme had an immediately clear, potent vision for how to bring this material to the screen. That vision was crucial to the eventual Big Five win. It was consistent from the page to the performance.
Speaking of execution, the settings for the film are iconic, but the shooting locations and the real-world inspiration behind the horror are often overlooked.
They are. Filming primarily took place in and around Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, utilizing that gritty, industrial atmosphere of the region. It also incorporated parts of nearby northern West Virginia.
But what truly lent the film its unusual, chilling authenticity was the level of cooperation they received from official sources.
Specifically, the FBI, which is highly unusual for a major studio picture dealing with such sensitive material.
Extremely rare.
The FBI provided the production with rare cooperation, allowing scenes to be filmed at the actual FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia.
Really? At the actual academy?
Yes. We know that some FBI staff members even took small bit parts in the film, providing background and expertise. This lent a layer of verisimilitude to Clarice Starling's world that no amount of set dressing could replicate. It made the FBI feel like a genuine, high-stakes workplace.
And then, on the other side of the authenticity coin, there's the genuine tragic inspiration behind the fictional horror of Buffalo Bill's lair.
Yes, the notorious basement and the pit where Catherine Martin is imprisoned were not entirely imagined. The physical design of that awful space was heavily inspired by the real-life kidnappings and murders committed by Gary M. Heidnik in Philadelphia.
That is a deeply sobering detail. It reminds us that the fictional terror in the film, particularly the physical mechanism of the capture and imprisonment, is rooted in documented, brutal, criminal pathology.
Right. The creators ensured that even the staging of the horror felt grounded in reality.
It's not a monster movie.
By grounding the set design in those grim facts, Demme immediately raises the stakes. You are not watching a monster movie, you are watching a procedural thriller about real-world evil.
Let's pivot now to the casting, which is often cited as a perfect confluence of talent, but which nearly went a completely different direction for both lead roles. We can start with Clarice Starling, a role Jodie Foster fought tooth and nail for.
Foster's determination is legendary. She was interested immediately after reading Thomas Harris's novel. And you have to remember, she was coming off immense professional success, having just won her first Best Actress Oscar for The Accused.
You'd think she'd be a shoo-in.
Despite that, director Jonathan Demme was notably reluctant and initially sought other actors for the role.
Why the hesitation regarding an actor of Foster's caliber and profile?
While Demme's initial vision leaned toward a slightly different feel, his first choice was Michelle Pfeiffer, with whom he had collaborated successfully on Married to the Mob.
Okay.
Pfeiffer ultimately turned the role down, later explaining that she felt deeply uncomfortable with the gruesome themes and the dark nature of the material.
So, twice now, first with Gene Hackman and then with Pfeiffer, the sheer darkness of the source material caused major talent to step away from the project. That tells you volumes about the script's inherent intensity.
It certainly does. Demme also considered Meg Ryan, who also declined for similar reasons related to the gruesome themes. And the studio considered Laura Dern, but they worried about her box office appeal and general bankability at the time,
Right.
given the substantial investment they were making in a dark thriller.
So how did Foster get it?
Ultimately, Foster secured the role because her palpable, intense passion for the character, which shone through in her meetings and screen tests, was exactly what the character needed. She convinced them she was Starling.
And now we turn to the figure who instantly became cinematic legend, Dr. Hannibal Lecter. Anthony Hopkins' interpretation is now so thoroughly defined that it's impossible to imagine anyone else. Yet Demme's original vision also rested elsewhere.
Demme's first choice for the civilized cannibal was Sean Connery.
Connery.
Connery declined, and that led to Anthony Hopkins being offered the part based on his prior intense work in films like The Elephant Man.
Hopkins' initial reaction to the film's title is one of the great anecdotes of cinema history.
Oh, it is. When his agent told him about the script called The Silence of the Lambs, he asked rather innocently, "Is it a children's story?"
A perfectly understandable question.
A perfectly understandable question given the almost poetic title. But once he received the script, his perspective shifted instantly.
And that shift was immediate and decisive.
He called his agent back after reading just the first 10 pages and declared, "This is the best part I've ever read." He committed to the role right away after a single dinner meeting with Demme.
Incredible.
The clarity of the writing, even at that early stage, communicated the character's extraordinary potential.
That single decision cemented his career. It's worth noting the other iconic actors who were considered but passed over: Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Dustin Hoffman, and Jeremy Irons. But it was Hopkins who meticulously crafted the stillness, the vocal cadence, and the intense presence that terrified millions.
Hopkins' preparation was extremely detailed and drawn from unexpected sources. He specifically cited 2 sources for his vocal performance and his physical stillness.
What were they?
For the voice, he drew inspiration from the calm, unnervingly controlled tone of the HAL 9000 computer, as voiced by Douglas Rain in 2001, A Space Odyssey.
The machine-like calm of HAL, a completely rational intelligence dedicated to destruction. That is a chilling touchstone. What was the second source for the cadence?
The vocal patterns of writer Truman Capote. The juxtaposition is brilliant. The cool, synthesized logic of the machine combined with the peculiar, affected delivery of a literary figure.
That's an incredible mix.
This combination created a character who was supremely intelligent, but also deeply unsettlingly strange.
He also had to address the inevitable rumors about his acting choices.
Yes, Hopkins actively refuted several claims. Some speculated his precise cadence was based on Katharine Hepburn, while others, trying to find a source for his chilling stillness and unblinking stare, suggested Charles Manson. He clarified publicly that neither of those figures served as inspiration.
He wanted it to be original.
He wanted the performance to be something new, something purely intellectualized.
The character's visual presentation is equally iconic, particularly the muzzle he wears. That piece of equipment has its own surprising story.
The physical props contributed massively to the legend. That iconic mask, the symbol of primal, powerful restraint, was uniquely crafted by Ed Cubberley. And what's fascinating here is that Cubberley was a specialist in making custom masks for NHL goalkeepers.
That detail is incredible. The horror wasn't just in the script, it was in the engineered details.
Exactly. It subtly implies that Lecter is a danger so profound he must be contained by industrial athletic strength, the kind of specialized gear designed to stop high-velocity impact. It takes the idea of restraint out of the realm of medieval torture and places it firmly in the modern, engineered world.
Now, if we talk about preparation, we must discuss the profound level of research demanded of the cast, particularly Scott Glenn, who played Jack Crawford, the head of the FBI Behavioral Science Unit.
Right. Glenn's commitment to the role involved spending considerable time with the actual expert the character was based on, John E. Douglas, a legendary figure from the FBI Behavioral Science Unit in Quantico.
The real deal.
Douglas gave Glenn an extensive tour and insight into the unit's work. But what followed highlights the brutal, emotional reality underpinning the film's fiction.
And this detail is intense, and we must treat it with the necessary gravity, recognizing the real-world suffering involved.
Yes. Douglas, in an effort to immerse Glenn in the true psychological cost of the work, played the actor an audio tape. This tape contained recordings that 2 notorious serial killers, Lawrence Bittaker and Roy Norris, had made of themselves during the rape and subsequent torture of a 16-year-old girl.
That is just harrowing. It is hard to imagine the emotional toll of witnessing that kind of raw, documented evil.
The source material confirms the profound emotional impact this moment had on Scott Glenn. Douglas recounted that Glenn wept upon hearing the recordings.
I can't even imagine.
Furthermore, the experience reportedly led Glenn, who previously held a politically liberal stance, to change his mind on the death penalty. We share this detail not for sensationalism, but because it serves as a powerful, necessary reminder that while The Silence of the Lambs is a fictional thriller,
It's rooted in something real.
The work of behavioral science and the study of these crimes involves facing unimaginable real-world horror and bearing the emotional toll of the victim's suffering.
That anecdote about Scott Glenn facing the raw material of evil serves as a profound reminder of the ethical lines this film walked and the brutal reality that grounds its fiction. It demands a moment of reflection. Now, transitioning from that dark reality, let's examine how the public actually received this intense, uncompromising work.
The public received it with open wallets. The film premiered on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1991, and was an immediate sensation.
An interesting choice for a release date.
It grossed almost $14 million over the four-day President's Day weekend and held the #1 box office spot for 5 straight weeks, ultimately becoming the 4th highest-grossing film of 1991 in North America.
That commercial success quickly solidified the critical consensus, which was overwhelmingly positive and helped propel it out of the niche horror genre and into the prestige drama category.
Oh, completely. Critics delivered universal acclaim, praising it as a smart, taut thriller, and specifically hailing the stellar performances from Foster and Hopkins. The film was so highly regarded that the late, great Roger Ebert, writing for the Chicago Sun-Times, added it to his permanent, exclusive list of the great movies, calling it a horror masterpiece. This was key. Critics recognized it as a masterpiece despite its genre trappings.
But there was one extremely notable exception to that chorus of praise, which offered an interesting counterpoint.
That was Gene Siskel, Ebert's famous colleague. Siskel gave the film a rare, poor review for what would become a Big Five Oscar winner.
What was his reason?
Siskel felt that Foster's appealing character, Clarice, was ultimately dwarfed by the monster she is after. He argued that the film spent too much time glorifying the villains and not enough time elevating the hero.
An interesting take.
Stating he would rather see Clarice work on another case. It's an interesting outlier opinion that suggests for some, the intellectualized darkness of Lecter and Buffalo Bill was just too overwhelming.
Regardless of Siskel's opinion, that critical success culminated in the unparalleled Big Five sweep at the 64th Academy Awards. But beyond the Oscars, the film's status is confirmed by its placement on various historical lists maintained by the American Film Institute, which judges influence over time.
The AFI rankings truly solidify its importance within the canon. It was ranked as number 65 on the 100 Greatest Movies list, which is a rare honor for a thriller. More appropriately, perhaps, it was listed as number 5 on the 100 Thrids list.
That makes sense.
Where the film's legend truly resides, however, is in the realm of character creation.
The dynamic of Lecter and Starling created cinematic figures that instantly became legendary.
Absolutely. The AFI named Hannibal Lecter the undisputed #1 film villain of all time, surpassing iconic figures like Darth Vader and the Wicked Witch of the West.
The #1 villain.
And on the flip side of that same coin, Clarice Starling was ranked as the #6 film hero of all time.
That's incredible for one film.
It is extraordinarily rare for both the protagonist and the antagonist of a single film to receive such high, simultaneous recognition across lists of heroes and villains. That speaks to the perfect symmetry of their conflict.
And their interactions gave us lines that entered the popular lexicon instantly. We
Yeah.
cannot forget one of the most quotable, yet deeply unsettling lines in cinema history.
The line, "A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti."
Chilling.
It captured the entire bizarre, sophisticated personality of Lecter in one sentence. That quote alone ranked number 21 on the AFI's 100 movie quotes list, demonstrating how deeply just a handful of words delivered with that chilling, precise cadence entered the popular culture.
Let's move to the legacy of the film, because this is where its true cultural influence becomes clear, especially regarding how Hollywood and the audience perceived the depiction of evil on screen.
The film fundamentally and irrevocably changed the cinematic representation of serial killers. Before Lecter, the sources tell us that film killers were often depicted as what they called claw-handed bogeymen with melty faces and rubber masks.
Right, like Freddy or Jason.
They were creatures of caricature or supernatural, almost cartoonish evil. They were threats to be physically overcome.
Hannibal Lecter redefined the threat. He wasn't a creature, he was a mind.
Exactly. Lecter was presented as highly intelligent, impeccably mannered, a man of culture, and crucially played by an actor, Anthony Hopkins, with serious, respected credentials.
He intellectualized evil.
Yes. His horror was rooted in psychological depth, manipulation, and control, not just jump scares or gore.
And this intellectualization had huge implications for the entire entertainment industry that followed.
This intellectualized evil didn't just win awards, it created the template for every subsequent procedural crime show and thriller. Without Lecter, you don't have the cerebral villains of shows like Criminal Minds, the complex forensic focus of the CSI franchise, or the high-concept psychological profiling that became a television standard.
It moved our fear from the physical threat to the psychological one.
The mind became the weapon.
Speaking of how time shifts our perception of fear, the film's official classification in the UK even changed, suggesting that its unique horror has become somewhat normalized for younger generations.
That reclassification story is fascinating. When The Silence of the Lambs was re-released in the United Kingdom in 2017, the British Board of Film Classification decided to lower the film's rating, reclassifying it from an 18 certificate, meaning only adults, to a 15 certificate.
So minors 15 and over could view it. That immediately suggests that what was shocking in 1991 is considered less so today.
That was one interpretation. Co-producer Ed Saxon attributed the reclassification directly to audience desensitization, suggesting society had simply gotten used to intense on-screen violence and psychological themes over 2 decades.
So the film was so effective at pioneering this genre that the audience, 25 years later, had become inoculated against its original shock value. That's a perverse measure of success.
But the BBFC's Craig Lapper offered an alternative and perhaps more insightful view.
What was that?
He argued that the film itself pioneered and created interest in the very themes complex serial killers and psychological profiling now commonplace in procedural crime dramas. The film set the standard,
So it made itself familiar.
making the subsequent generation of viewers entirely familiar with the tropes that were revolutionary in 1991.
That's a profound legacy. The film was so influential that it actually changed the viewing landscape itself, thereby diminishing its own original shock value. However, that powerful influence has not been without significant and necessary controversy, specifically concerning the character of Buffalo Bill, or James Gumb.
This is a long-standing and important discussion that requires us to look carefully at the context of the source material. In the years following its release, the film faced substantial criticism regarding its portrayal of gender identity and sexual politics.
Right.
Specifically, some gay male critics and feminists felt that the portrayal of Buffalo Bill, particularly his desire to transform himself, negatively associated the LGBT community with deviance, psychopathy, and extreme violence.
It's essential to look at the defense presented within the narrative itself regarding Buffalo Bill's stated motivations for what he does.
The film's creators attempted to preempt this criticism by using Dr. Lecter as a voice of clarification. When Clarice asks about Gum, Hannibal Lecter explicitly states that Buffalo Bill is not a genuine transsexual.
Okay.
He surmises that Bill mistakenly assumes he is, possibly because he was rejected from multiple gender reassignment clinics due to his severe underlying psychological instability. The film attempts to separate Gum's specific psychopathic violence from genuine gender identity issues.
And director Jonathan Demme also offered his own public defense to distance the character from the community.
Demme told the New York Times that Bill wasn't a gay character. He was a tormented man who hated himself and wished he was a woman because that would have made him as far away from himself as he possibly could be.
So he saw it as self-hatred.
Demme acknowledged that he realized there was a tremendous absence of positive gay characters in movies at the time, but he did not view Buffalo Bill as being written to fill or define that definition.
Yet the criticism has continued and evolved over time, especially concerning the film's use of a villain who sought physical transformation as a sign of his madness.
Absolutely. More recent trans-feminist critics offered a powerful counter-argument to the film's defense. They criticized the film for alleged transphobia and transmisogyny.
So just to clarify for our listener, in this context, what are those specific critiques referring to?
Well, in the cinematic context, transphobia relates to prejudice against transgender people, and transmisogyny refers to the specific hatred experienced by trans women, which is a combination of anti-trans bias and misogyny.
Okay.
And the specific critical argument raised against the film was that the filmmaker's explicit denial that Bill is really transsexual, even if it was intended to be an inclusive move, actually encourages disbelief and scrutiny of trans people's self-identification in the real world.
So the argument is that by making the villain's identity fake or a symptom of madness, it created a problematic trope for subsequent films to follow.
Exactly. It highlights the complex and evolving nature of cultural representation and interpretation over time, particularly when a film becomes as iconic as this one.
And while the controversy focuses heavily on Buffalo Bill, the film also implicitly engages with Clarice Starling's gendered context in a very effective, subtle way.
That is a key thematic point often discussed by film scholars as to why the film resonated so strongly. Throughout the film, Clarice Starling's gender is consistently emphasized as a distinguishing feature.
Well, constantly.
She operates as a minority among her numerous male peers in the FBI and the challenges she faces. From the dismissive attitudes of some agents to the inappropriate predatory advances from Dr. Chilton, underscore the systemic hurdles she must overcome in a male-dominated environment.
The film never stops reminding you that she's the only woman in the room, making her determination and vulnerability equally potent.
And that vulnerability is essential to her interaction with Lecter. The psychological tension between them works because Lecter recognizes her vulnerability but also respects her singular drive. Her gender is not a flaw. It is the context through which her heroism is forged.
Moving away from the content itself, let's explore the profound post-film echo, starting with the score and the iconic needle drops that have become inseparable from certain scenes.
The primary score was composed by Howard Shore, a frequent and trusted collaborator with Jonathan Demme. They worked together later on the film Philadelphia.
Great score on that, too.
Shore approached the music not as an accompaniment, but as something that would go right into the fabric of the movie. He wanted the music to fit in so well that you weren't immediately aware of it as a separate element.
Just a feeling.
But that it blended with all the visual elements, the lighting, the claustrophobic cinematography, and the acting, to generate the overriding feeling of dread and tension.
He created the emotional atmosphere, but the two popular music tracks used in the film achieved their own distinct cult status because of the scenes they accompany.
Without a doubt. The use of popular music is one of the film's most memorable choices. The British post-punk song, Hip Priest by The Fall, a driving and aggressive track, is heard playing in the background during the climactic scene when Clarice enters Buffalo Bill's home.
It's so jarring.
It adds a chaotic, unsettling energy to the chase.
But the song that is now inextricably linked to the film's unique horror is Q Lazarus's Goodbye Horses.
That track, with its dreamy, melancholic new wave sound, achieved genuine cult hit status, specifically because of the iconic scene where Buffalo Bill is dancing while applying makeup, looking into the mirror and tucking himself.
That scene is unforgettable.
This song's slow, almost ethereal beauty contrasts violently with the visceral horror of Gumm's actions.
And that juxtaposition is key. Why does that contrast amplify the scene's unsettling qualities so effectively?
The song feels introspective and strangely beautiful, which creates a window into Gumm's internal pathology. By using music that is sensitive and melancholic rather than purely scary, Demme forces the audience to confront the villain's deep, warped sense of self-expression.
It's intimate.
It humanizes the monster just enough to make his horror feel intimate and profoundly disturbing. It strips away the easy comfort of pure caricature.
Looking forward, The Silence of the Lambs defined the Hannibal Lecter franchise for a generation, leading to substantial expansion but also fracturing the original creative team.
It did. The character's massive critical and commercial popularity spurred a significant franchise push. We saw the direct sequel, Hannibal, released a decade later in 2001.
Right.
Then came the prequel adaptations. Red Dragon in 2002, which was a readaptation of the first novel that Manhunter had used, and Hannibal Rising in 2007.
But that first sequel, Hannibal, is perhaps most interesting because it reveals the immense creative differences that arose after the 1991 film's success.
The key detail is that only Anthony Hopkins returned for Hannibal.
That's right.
Both Jodie Foster and director Jonathan Demme declined to be involved in the sequel. Their refusal was based on serious concerns over the direction of the new script, specifically noting an increase of violence and gore.
So it was just too graphic for them.
That they felt compromised, the carefully calibrated psychological thriller nature established in The Silence of the Lambs.
So Foster and Demme prioritized the intelligent, contained psychological terror over the purely visceral blockbuster violence that the studio seemed to want a decade later. They stayed true to the original film's core ethos.
Exactly. They recognized that the brilliance of the first film was in the tension and the dialogue, not the blood. And of course, the Lecter and Starling story has continued to echo across other media formats, particularly television.
The character universe Thomas Harris created continues to be incredibly fruitful.
Yes, we saw the critically acclaimed, sophisticated TV series Hannibal, which ran from 2013 to 2015, which primarily adapted the prequel novels, focusing heavily on the relationship between Lecter and FBI profiler Will Graham.
A fantastic show.
And more recently, in 2021, the series Clarice was launched, which takes place specifically after the events of the original film, with actress Rebecca Breeds portraying Clarice, showing the lasting public appetite for exploring this specific character.
Finally, we must acknowledge a bizarre and very modern footnote to the film's legacy that surfaced in 2024. It speaks to how deeply embedded this fictional figure is in the cultural consciousness that he would suddenly appear in a high-profile political context.
It is the unusual cultural resurrection of Hannibal Lecter by President Donald Trump. During his 2024 presidential campaign, President Trump repeatedly referenced the fictional character, often in the context of comparing immigrants to the fictional character and claiming foreign governments were sending criminals to the United States.
Yeah, that was strange.
He went as far as to describe Lecter as a wonderful man and spoke of him as if he were a real, existing historical figure.
And the actor who embodied this iconic villain had a strong public reaction to this political use of his creation.
Anthony Hopkins publicly stated that he was shocked and appalled by President Trump's use of the character. This striking contemporary event, a political candidate invoking a fictional Oscar-winning serial killer, serves as absolute proof of how profoundly and recognizable this character remains in global discourse, decades after the film's release.
So if we look back at this unparalleled achievement, what truly stands out most about The Silence of the Lambs? What did this film do that no other horror or thriller has managed since?
We see a unique synergy of factors that resulted in lightning being bottled. The depth of the performances, particularly Hopkins' chilling stillness and Foster's palpable determination, elevated what could have been a standard genre film into high art.
Absolutely.
The production overcame early setbacks, including the loss of Gene Hackman and the necessity of negotiating complex rights for free, to deliver a product so refined it captured the Big Five Oscars, an achievement we may never see again for a film of this genre.
And most importantly,
it provoked deep, lasting cultural discussions, both positive by redefining the intelligent villain and institutionalizing the psychological profiling hero, and controversial by sparking necessary debate about the ethics of portraying gender identity and sexuality in cinema.
it is a film that didn't just scare us with blood or jump scares. It forced us to look into the mirror of human depravity and intellectualized evil, and it made us think seriously about the complex, dangerous work of the people who hunt it.
That brings us to a final idea for you to consider as you reflect on this film's legacy. Ultimately, the profound achievement of The Silence of the Lambs is that it convinced millions of viewers that the true location of horror isn't a shadowy house or a rubber mask.
It's in the mind.
It demonstrated that the most terrifying threat is the one that is supremely organized and functions behind a pair of completely rational eyes. By shifting the focus of fear from the physical threat to the intellectual one, it solidified the profiler, the one who understands that intellectual horror, as the definitive modern-day hero.
Thank you for sharing this file with us.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening.